All right, hey everybody. Today I want to go through Introduction to Illustrator. I know I usually do these on Tuesdays and Thursdays, at least I have for the past few weeks. It's just not going to work this week. Kind of last minute, but my parents need some help later this week at their summer home, and we're going to go help them out, which is kind of awesome because we have not left. We've not went anywhere in the last like 6 months, and I haven't seen my parents for 6 months. So it'd be really nice to see them for a few days. So I just don't want to. I don't want to plan to do anything later this week. I may be on live again, but I just didn't want to like guarantee it. So I wanted to do this now. So what I'm going to do today is I want to do an introduction to Adobe Illustrator. One of my favorite pieces, definitely in like my top 10 pieces of software of all time, is Adobe Illustrator. The funny thing about this software is, I mentioned this before, but I learned Adobe Photoshop in like the mid to late 90s. And then there was Adobe Photoshop. There was Image Ready, a program called Image Ready, which allowed you to create like animated GIFs and stuff like that. Now you can do it in Photoshop. They combined the two. And they had Illustrator. At the time, and for like 15 years after I learned Photoshop, I despised Illustrator. I mean, I despised this piece of software like there's no tomorrow. I hated it so much because it's similar to Photoshop, but it's just different enough to drive you nuts. And what I mean by that, it's almost like going from a Mac to a PC. When you go from one to the other and you're not used to it, at first it's just like, oh, I don't like this. Why is it so difficult? Or like when you try to drive someone else's car. Like, why aren't things in the same place I'm used to? Now, things are in the same place in Illustrator, but it's just a little different the way you operate. Your mind almost has to like think in reverse of Photoshop to do this. So let's talk about it. Let me go through the interface quickly, and then we'll do that while we're starting a new image. I'll go through the interface, and then I want to show you some different things, talk a little bit about how the software is used, and we'll go from there and see if we have any questions or anything like that too. So I'll pull up my this just to make sure, see if I have any questions or anything like that. Okay, interface. So I'm going to go to File, New, and we're going to create a new interface. So, obviously before this, if I scroll down here, you can see they give me like some presets. I don't want to do that. I want to create a new thing. So remember, the reason that we use Adobe Illustrator is because we're creating something that can get big or small. It doesn't matter. It's based on mathematics. So it does not matter. These are images do not get pixelated when you create them in Adobe Illustrator. So if I was creating like an image that's going to be on t-shirts, like a logo for a company, websites, the side of a building, a billboard, I would use Illustrator over Photoshop because I could blow up the image to be on the side of the billboard or shrink it down to be like a little symbol for a web app or whatever. So that's why I use Illustrator. All right, so I'm starting a new image. Now for my class, my assignment that I have my students do, I have them create an assignment using inches. It's a 4x4 logo. That's their assignment in Illustrator, just so they learn the basic look and feel. Now, I personally hate using inches when I'm designing anything, but whenever so my wife has a company and we have to work with different print shops all the time. I probably work with like 6 different print shops every year printing various things, whether that's t-shirts or labels and different things with them. And every single one of them requires us to use inches. So I use inches when I have my students develop because I realize print shops most likely want inches. The reason the print shops want inches is because it's much easier for clients in general who are not like Illustrator experts to understand the difference between, they don't understand what a pixel is, but they get inches. It makes sense in their brain. So a lot of print shops will request inches from you. Okay, so having said that, we are going to start an image. Okay, let's see. We have 4x4 inches, one artboard. So artboard is like, think of like I don't want to say your layers, but it's kind of like your layers in Photoshop. It's almost like more like I'm trying to think of a good analogy for an artboard, but just think of like it's another piece of paper that I can draw on. It's very similar to what a layer does in Illustrator. We don't need any bleed for this image, but the reason that we do create bleed for images, and I've explained this in other videos, is that so when I'm creating like a print for like a t-shirt or like a sign, something that's going to be printed, I can't assume that the printer is going to be exact. So if I was creating an image, a logo that was 4x4, it was going to be printed on a 4x4 square, I usually take about 10 to 15%, so like 12.5%, and assume that that's going to be my bleed. So if I knew it was printing on a 4x4 square, I would probably do like 3.85 images, 3.85 inches. I would not make my logo bigger than that, so there was some bleed room. All right. We don't need to do anything since we're not really printing this right now, so I'm not even going to worry about that. Color mode, Illustrator, you're always in CMYK because you're always assuming you're printing in Illustrator. Definitely high DPI. We're going to stick with their default of 300. That's fine, and we're going to click Create. We're going to click Create. It's going to take a second to create my image, pop it up. It's big. I can make it small. Just Control minus, Control plus on the PC. Makes it big or small. Okay. So we're in Illustrator, and let me just make sure I have everything pulled up here. Okay, so left-hand side, super similar to Photoshop, right? We have all of our tools. All of our tools, and the tools that we don't have. So some of these tools are similar, like we should recognize, oh, a text tool. Well, that's just like Photoshop, right? So some similar tools. But, oh, a paint tool. That's just like Photoshop, but these tools don't behave necessarily the way that they do in Photoshop. And we have some different tools on here, like things like Artboard tool and stuff that is not in Photoshop. So we have to get used to some different tools. And a lot of this is just you playing around with the tools and learning how to function in Illustrator. Then we have our colors. And if we click down here, the toolbar, so we can customize our toolbar just like Photoshop or use different workspaces, just like Photoshop. So, you know, your toolbar might not look exactly like mine, but here are all the tools if you're ever missing any. You know, we've got our workspaces here. So depending on what kind of workspace you're using, you know, this might look a little different. Oops, I just drew something on the screen. Okay, top. We have our basic, you know, our file where we save and do all that stuff. And then very similar to Photoshop, we have some options. Like this is for editing, objects, type, select. We have effects just like Photoshop. You know, in Photoshop, we have the filters, viewing different things. And our window, like if we're missing our properties or something like that, we could pull it up. And then help where you can get like Illustrator tutorials and stuff. Then on the right hand side, make sure you can see all of that. Yes, you can. There's nothing at the bottom here where my image is, so I'm not covering anything. We have our layers, libraries, and properties. So, you know, I didn't talk about this in Photoshop, but library, and it's because I don't use them at all. But the libraries are basically like a way to save objects that you're using that you might want to pull over. So like, let me give you an example. And this is especially key in Illustrator, not so much in Photoshop. So like, for example, let's say I worked at Nike and I just created the Nike logo. I would probably save my logo as an object and put it in my library. That way, whenever myself or anyone from the company, it'd be in the cloud, needed to pull up the Nike logo, we wouldn't have to keep recreating it. I wouldn't have to keep like going to file, open, and find it. I would just go to my library and slide it right on. That's the purpose of the library. It's like checking out a book. So it's very useful in Illustrator, not so much in Photoshop, but we use them a lot in Illustrator when we're creating something like a logo that's going to be reused many, many times. Okay, that's it. That's the basics. That's what, I mean, it's 100% similar to Photoshop, and actually look and feel, in my opinion, is more simple than Photoshop. Yet, I find Illustrator is significantly more complicated than Photoshop once you get into it. And I know many graphic artists who don't touch Photoshop. They 100% only use Illustrator. That's really when I personally started getting into Illustrator, when I would talk to different graphic artists who were like, yeah, we don't use Photoshop. And I was like, what? They were like, we use Illustrator. And I was like, I really got to get into it. So I'd say like around like 2010, I really started to get and spend a lot of time in Illustrator, especially with my wife's company starting in like 2013, 2014. I had to use Illustrator professionally to create all this stuff for her. So I've been using it extensively since then. Okay, so basics of Illustrator. Let me just show you some basic things. So first of all, we have two mouses here. We have our selection mouse, we have this black mouse, and we have a white mouse. We use these for two different things, and I'm going to show you how each of them can be used. But they are used for different things, and we use these mice because they're very important. Now, we have like things like selection tools, we have like type and basic objects, but basic tools, but these tools will function differently than Photoshop, for example. So first of all, one thing, let's point out our layers. Let's talk about layers in Photoshop or in Illustrator. Layers are definitely more unusual. Every time you do something in Illustrator, you are creating a new layer, or what they call an artboard. So I can create new layers, but by default, every time I click the mouse, a new layer is created. Not up in the software, but the way you think of layers in Photoshop, that is created in Illustrator with an artboard. So every time you click the mouse, a new artboard is created. It's almost like put on top of the next one. So you don't technically have to create new layers in Illustrator. They're done for you. Layers in Illustrator are much more useful for organizing different objects from one another, versus Photoshop, where you use them every time you do something so you don't like mess up the next thing. In Illustrator, it's more done to keep things separate, like different, almost like an organization, almost how the folders would be used in Illustrator, if that makes sense. Okay, so let me show you how to do something. Let me paint. Let's paint. Let's pick a color here. There are, and just like Photoshop, there are like a million ways to do everything. I could pick color like 10 different ways. We are going to make a palm tree here. So I'm going to draw. I've got my mouse selected. I don't have my properties up. I can pull up my properties. I can see them right over here for my tool. So just like Photoshop, they can be in the top here. I pulled them up over here. I can see my tool options if I would like to. What am I doing? I have a fill. I have a stroke. I talked about stroke in Photoshop. Stroke is like an outline of what I'm creating. Okay. I see someone commented they use layers and storyline. Yes, that's a whole different thing when you're working in the timeline and you're creating something there using layers. But you don't have to use them so much in Illustrator. Photoshop is a must. Things like Captivate, any kind of video software or development software like Captivate, Animate, Final Cut, Adobe Premiere, you definitely will use layers. So let's see. Let's draw a little palm tree. So notice the first thing you see, I'm drawing the leaves. Notice how it's very imperfect, and it makes it perfect. There's my palm tree. Pretty bad palm tree, right? I'm honestly terrible at drawing with a mouse. When I'm going to draw something on the computer, I usually will use this iPad so that I can draw much better, because I'm actually really good at drawing. I draw all the time, but drawing with a mouse and keyboard, especially when I'm like behind, like my hands like behind me, no, and I'm a lefty and I'm drawing on the mouse and keyboard with my right hand. Okay, so I drew this. Now the first thing you notice is as I drew like something like it made it very straight and neat. So why does it do that? It does that because Illustrator is based on mathematics. There are no pixels. So it makes it straight and neat for that reason. But the cool thing about Illustrator is, you know, let's say I messed up some of these lines here. I don't need to erase them. Now I can erase them, but I don't need to. I can actually select the mouse, and when I select the mouse, look at what happens when I scroll over an object. Notice how all of these are on layer 1. Everything is on layer 1. And if I look down at layer 1, here's every single thing that I did. Layer 1 actually has 1, 2, 3, like 10 layers on it. When I scroll over one of these and select it, I can shrink it down. I can make it bigger. I can try to connect it to this to actually fix it. This little one I'm going to delete. I actually connected those. All that I'm doing is I have my black mouse. I'm selecting it. Well, this actually, I moved it by accident. Or I can connect it. Now, it doesn't always work that, like, you know, you can move it in this perfect manner that I am. So let's say I can't do it. I've done it for those few. Let's say I can't. I can select my white mouse and I can actually click on one of these dots and just pull that dot into what I'm trying to do. be careful here. So essentially my point, let me go back to my black mouse. I'm going to move these two away. Essentially my point is that I can take a really bad drawing and I can make it much better using some very simple tools in Illustrator. It helps you draw and create, which is really, really cool. Something that I really like about Illustrator is it does help you draw. One like awesome activity in Illustrator that I love to have students do is to pick something like an ad from a magazine or something like that and actually put it in Illustrator, turn down the opacity and trace it and learn how to trace and draw, completely draw something in Illustrator. Great activity. It really teaches you how to use these tools and how to do everything. So it's really neat. And you can fill things in. You can fill in colors like very, very, very easily. Oh, I accidentally selected no fill for some reason. But I could have colored in here using the fill option, whatever. So now if I drew, it would fill it in. I really like Illustrator for this reason. The tools are very nice. And once you get used to them, they actually feel better than Photoshop and some of the things. So now this is still just a terrible, terrible drawing, but you get the idea of what you can do, and it's something to really play around with. Okay, two more things I want to show you guys today. I want to show you how to use the image trace feature, and I want to talk about saving and printing your files. So we're actually going to pull up another image. I'm going to go to File, Open, and what I'm going to do, let's see, what do we want to pull up? There we go. This is a wave that I was surfing on the other day. And no, I'm completely kidding. I was not surfing this wave the other day. I was surfing yesterday, actually, but not this wave. This is like a huge wave. I feel like I painted this wave before. Probably. There's just so many pictures of waves, and I have so many that I never know. Okay, but I pulled up this image. Now, this is a photograph. So when you pull up a photograph, I can't blow this up, right? The same thing happens in Photoshop. Look at that, pixelated. So you can't put this picture on the side of a building. So how do companies do that? Well, first of all, when they're taking their picture with their camera, if I was taking a picture that's going to be blown up on the side of a building, I would take the picture to be that big. That's hands down first step. Because you don't want to mess with, remember, the less you have to edit, the better. Our goal is to not have to, we have to use Photoshop and Illustrator for various things, but I don't want to do something in Photoshop or Illustrator that I could have just done with a picture, right? Not what you want to do. So I need to turn this image into a mathematical based formula that can be blown up indefinitely. So how do I do that? I use a feature called image trace. Now, image trace is a really interesting tool because basically the computer's making up, using AI, it's completely just making up what your image should look like if it was a piece of math, which is interesting. So sometimes it does a really, really, really good job. And sometimes it does a really, really bad job. Now you can teach it and tell it how to do it. So if I had all day long to sit there and make something perfect, I could do it. But what I'm going to show you is just how to do it in like 1 second, just to have like the base of it. Okay, so the first thing I need to do, I need to click on my image. Now, I clicked on my image, but I'm not in the image yet. Like I'm on layer 1, but I'm not in the image. I need to go here. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to double click until I see that from layer 1 into image. Even just going to layer 1 here doesn't put me in it. I need to go in the image, right? I need to get in it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Window, Image Trace. So let me click on my image again. Window, Image Trace. Where is the image trace? Oh, here we go. Sorry. Pulled up on the right. I have 3 monitors up, so sometimes things like go to the other one. Anyway, oh, you can actually see two of my monitors, here and here, and you can't see the one I'm working from. Well, you can, because that's what I'm sharing. But here is image trace. Now, you can set this to whatever you want to. Right now, it's set to black and white, so it's going to make this black and white. I want it to be color, and I can play around, like how many colors, how many points. Like I can start to play around with all this stuff, and I can get it. I can actually go in and make it, like start playing with the features to like make it like pretty perfect. But we're just messing around right now. So I made it color. I'm going to click trace, and it's going to trace it. It takes a minute. There we go. Now, notice how this looks very similar to like the palette feature in Photoshop, filter. But what I've done is I've taken a very complex image and made it so that I can blow it up. But I mean, this looks like a cartoon all of a sudden. It does not look like a real picture, right? And that's what happens when you use this feature. So you can't just like take like a photo of a person and it's not going to look like the person. It's going to look more, it's going to blend colors together and do things like this. I mean, I could have made this more detailed by changing some of these features here, which I did not do. But this is what it looks like. And now this picture is based on math. Now I can do whatever I want to this image. I could change it in a million different ways. I can blow it up and stuff, and now I've got the image trace done. So that's all you do. So keep in mind, and now to get back to my picture, I'm simply going to click to back to my regular working space. I'm simply going to click this arrow here to get back, and now I'm back. So if you're going into the image trace and you like, well, now it's all automatically just putting me there because I already did it. Let me undo the image trace and get out. So if you're like, let's see, let me pull up image trace. If you click on, oh, now of course it's going right into the image. But sometimes if you click on image and you have image trace up, oh, there we go. See how it's grayed out and it doesn't look like it's working? Just click on the image. You just weren't clicked in it. That's all. It just wants you to be in here on the image. That's all. And now notice how, and let's do it black and white. We can see what it looks like. That's pretty not good. I actually thought the color one was pretty cool. There, I did it again. Okay. Final thing that I want to talk about today is printing. So, printing in Illustrator. There are a couple of ways to save, print your images. So obviously when you save your image in Illustrator, well, I shouldn't say obviously, if you're new, you're learning, it's an AI file, .ai. So when you save your, it's just like when Photoshop, it's a PSD, and Illustrator, it's a .ai. That is your native development file type. But I can't send an AI image to you. I couldn't send you an AI image. Why? Because let's say I'm using different fonts and I send you an image. What's going to happen is none of the fonts are going to come with the image. It's going to look like there's not going to be images. There's not going to be fonts. The person's actually going to see like this pink error box up on the screen. So we don't want that to happen. So let me show you a few things I do. So the first thing that I do, let me actually add some text here. Oh my goodness, did I really mess that up? Okay, let me make this bigger. Text size, just so y'all can see it. There we go. Let's select our black mouse, put it down here. Okay, so we have our text. So the first thing I want to do to all fonts before I send them to someone, now I can just send someone the JPEG or the PDF version or the EPS version. I'll talk about all three of those. And they don't need the fonts, but good practice is that I always create outlines of my text so I do not need to worry about sending someone font files, especially if I want to send them the development version. Like I can now, once I do what I'm going to do here, I could send someone the AI version and they're not going to lose the font. So I just want to show you the trick. I make sure my text is selected. I go to type and I select create outlines. Watch my text here. Watch what happens. Notice how the whole box is selected. I'll move it over here so you can see it a little better. The whole box is selected. I'm going to select type, create outlines. Now look what happened. The box changed around it. And when I zoom in even more, when I push Control, you can see that each of my letters is now its own separate object. What this did is it basically said, I cannot edit this text anymore. I mean, I can delete each letter individually, but I can't just make it say something different now. Hello is now separate, technically, like the way the computer sees it is each of those letters is its own separate thing. It's not one word. So it takes the ability for me to have to send a font to someone. It changes that, which is good, but it also means I can't change that lettering unless I redo it now. So just know that. It's a good habit to have when you're sending an AI file to someone, is to make sure your text has been modified or they will not see the fonts. And especially when you're talking about like a logo or something, text, the font is extremely important. It can make or break the logo, right? Okay. So to save, we've got a couple options. We've got the two big ways that we save besides AI are PDF and EPS. So let's talk about it. I don't know which one I talk about first. I guess I can talk about PDF first. So PDF is simply a PDF file that someone sends you and you open up all the time in Microsoft, any email or online. You go to like a research paper or something, it's a PDF file, right? Same thing, same exact kind of file. Think of it, you just need Adobe Acrobat. It's free. You open it up, boom, they got the PDF file. The reason we love PDFs, they keep all the colors and everything the same as you created it. All the fonts and all that stuff rolls it into a file. And it's very easy for everyone to open up. So a lot of print shops will ask for PDF files. Now, I told you that I work with a number of print shops, and literally different ones throughout the year, every single year. We always are going through a different company for something. So we have like multiple accounts with them, so we're always going through someone different. I would say that like 10% of them want the PDF file. PDF is kind of like the new file standard for stuff like this. The old file standard is EPS. And I would say the other 80% either want a JPEG or they want the EPS file. So we're usually sending the EPS file. So let me show you how to do that. So PDF, I simply push save and I save the PDF file. EPS, there are a couple options, so I just want to show you one that I have to use all the time. All right, I click save. Oh, of course, my computer's always trying to do an update when I am on here. I push save, and one of the things I found is that these print shops do not have the latest version of Illustrator. So I actually sometimes need to go back like to CS4 or CS5 or CS6. So you can actually pick which version of Illustrator do you want to save it for. It's just giving you a warning. You might lose some things. Honestly, I've never lost anything when I do this, and I do have to do it all the time. And then you just click OK, and it saves the EPS file. And that's it. And the EPS file is opened up in Illustrator, whereas the PDF can be opened up in anything like Adobe Acrobat, which is why the Acrobat file, the PDF, is much better for printing. So just be familiar that with just some of the different file types that you may be asked to use. And if someone asks the most common, it's you and you have a preference, it's PDF. But the EPS is still used a lot, unfortunately, because I'm finding I'm just amazed that print shops are still using CS4. They just don't upgrade. So, and I get it because, I've said this a bunch of times when I talked about Photoshop. Photoshop doesn't really get updated. Like little things change here and there, but like it's still the same piece of software. Same thing with Illustrator. So that's why the print shops aren't upgrading, and they have a version that's like 8 years old because it really hasn't changed. So they're just using the old version. So yeah, that's what I wanted to show in Illustrator today. Just walk through the basic interface, talk a little bit about the tools, some of the basic stuff, show you how to use some of the tools like just the paint and show why it's different. Talk about the image trace tool. Talk a little bit about text and talk about saving your file for print. And those are the main things I wanted to cover. And that's a good start right there. That's a good base for you to go in and really start working with Illustrator. and trying to draw something, trying to create something, trying to recreate something, like draw like Pac-Man or something. I mean, that's what I like. That's like the first thing that pops into my head is Pac. But try to draw anything, like, and you know, see how easy and difficult it is. And that allows you to really learn this tool palette, really allows you to learn these colors, because there's a lot of things that the colors can do in Illustrator that are not similar to Photoshop. So there's a lot of like lessons to be learned as you start to play around and learn how to use things. So anyway, hope you enjoyed. And let's see. Yeah, we're at 2:30, so perfect. 30 minutes. I may be on later this week. I want to see what kind of questions I get throughout the week on Illustrator. And I'm going to be away, so I'm not going to have like my same camera and microphone, but I will have something. I will have some good equipment actually, and I have high-speed internet there and stuff. So like I could totally make a video. I didn't want to I don't want to plan it unless I feel like I need to. So I just wanted to make sure I did this today so that you guys would have it. Something else. I've got something really cool coming probably next week. It's going to be a really cool video. You'll see why when you see it. I don't want to ruin it because it's until it happens, I gotta not say anything. So anyway, I'll keep y'all posted on what I'm doing, and yeah, I'm heading out of town Wednesday to Sunday, so we'll see how that goes with coronavirus and everything, and trying to keep my kids safe and myself and wife and parents that I'm going to see. So anyway, have a good week, you guys. Anyone has any questions, always, you know, please let me know. Contact me in any way, and have a good day. Enjoy the weather all, and that's it.